think we're ready to start. Hi, everyone. I am Caitlyn Kumi. I'm your moderator today, and I'm really excited to chat with you guys, as well as the rest of the panelists, about how these amazing women have navigated their careers, they've navigated the challenges, they've navigated the ups and downs, and also looking into the room, it is amazing to see so many women at different stages of their career. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Brandis.
Hi guys, how's the volume? Can you hear us? Speak up a little bit louder? Is that better? Okay, it feels like we're screaming, but we'll just become comfortable with that feeling. And, it's very nice to meet you all. I'm just very grateful to Stany and to Webull for hosting this today. I'm really excited to now have this relationship with these other three women up here, which I didn't have previous today, so I really appreciate being here.
And our next panelist is Melissa.
Hi guys, hope you can hear me okay back there. Nice to meet you. I am a mom, part-time chauffeur, line cook, soccer, baseball coach, you name it. But also, I also co-founded Wall Street Rides Far, which is a charity event, a cycling event that goes to the Autism Science Foundation. And recovering small business owner, athlete, and on my free time, I am the director of digital assets at StoneX. Nice to meet you.
Wow, that's awesome.
Wow, I'm so impressed by everyone already. And last we have Arianne.
Hi everyone, great to be here. Thanks for coming to Webull, and obviously thanks to Stany for having us or joining us in this event. My name is Arianne Adams. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Webull Financial. I've been in the industry for 25 years in various different stages and various different roles of my career that we'll talk a little bit about today. But like my colleagues up here, I'm a working mom. I have 3 amazing kids, and so I obviously also fit into the mold of Uber driver and somewhat disciplinary in one day or whatever I can figure out every once in a while. So, but it's great to be here. And thanks a lot.
Thank you for that. And like I said before, I'm Caitlyn Kumi, your moderator. I'm the founder of Miss EmpowHer, a women's community, and I'm also a personal finance content creator. So today we're going to talk a little bit about changes. I think we can all agree as women, we're always navigating changes in our career, whether you're early career, whether you're later in your career. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we approach and navigate these changes. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start talking to Brandis. I know you've navigated a lot of career transitions. I know you started in the military, and then you made your way to fintech. And it kind of seems like those are very, very far apart. So I would love to talk a little bit about how you were able to transition, because sometimes the military culture is quite different than fintech.
Yes. And I guess I should actually introduce what I do for a living, aside from being a mother and now friends with these ladies. I'm Senior Vice President at Nasdaq, and I actually run our East Coast listings business. So looking at companies that want to go public on Nasdaq and companies that are currently public on Nasdaq and helping them navigate through that environment. I've been at Nasdaq for almost 15 years, but prior to that and a few other steps along the way, I was actually in the Navy. I went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, prior to 9/11, so did not expect the climate to be what it was when I left the Naval Academy, and essentially was directly sent overseas in order to support Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and the global war on terror. I spent about a little under 5 years on a naval destroyer in the Arabian Gulf and off the Horn of Africa, supporting those military efforts. It was a great leadership and learning experience, but I knew that I wanted to move to New York and try to work on Wall Street once I left the service. And I think I was strongly underprepared for what it would feel like to transition from the military into the corporate environment. And as a young, 20-something-year-old woman, I just wasn't given the tools or the networking prowess to be able to understand what needed to be done. And I think a few people here have heard this story before, and I'll keep it really short, but in the military, you're taught this lesson, this mantra, and it's called Message to Garcia. And that's what that story means, and they tell you this over and over again in the military service, is that there's the Cuban-American War, and there's this general in Cuba, and we need to get to him. He's an American, and we need to tell him that this situation is going to happen, and it's going to turn the course of the war, and it's going to help the U.S. win. And there's this grunt that they call up, and they say, soldier, we need you to get this message to Garcia in Cuba to win the Spanish-American War. The grunt never says, what's the message? Who's Garcia? Where's Garcia? How do I get there? When I find him, what do I tell him? He just gets the message to Garcia, the tide of the war turns, and the Americans win the war. The story is just get it done. Don't ask any questions, just get it done, right? And that's what you're taught in the military, and it's a really good way to think about things sometimes. It's a really bad way to enter the workforce, because what it teaches you is that you don't need to ask for help and you don't need to network. And joining, these types of groups and coming here today is exactly the opposite of Message to Garcia. You're seeking guidance, you're seeking help, you're seeking advice. That is the way of corporate America and success, and opposite of the way that the military actually works. So it took me a long time to reverse that mentality in my brain, that I could ask for help, that it wasn't a weakness, that it was a strength. And for a long time when I came to New York, I sat and I pounded the pavement and I said, resume after resume, why isn't anyone calling me back? Until another female West Point graduate actually took me aside and said, you're doing this all the wrong way. But it's because you've never been taught differently. So I do think that there's times when Message to Garcia really, really works, and it's a strength. But I think the best thing is to know that your network is a superpower, and asking for help is a superpower. It's something that we know every day as moms. You have to let somebody else help you, or you're never going to get there. So I think that was the biggest lesson in my transition, is that you need to be able to ask for help and ask, how can I get there? How can I get this done?
Thank you for sharing. I think it's always great when we can get those insights into things we have to unlearn sometimes, because sometimes we don't realize that, wow, like this mindset, this approach, it's not working.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share, tidbits where you had to pivot or change your approach in order to succeed?
I mean, I think, leaning on a female network is something that we underestimate, right? And so learning that approach, when I stumbled upon this woman from West Point who at that time was at Morgan Stanley, she sat me down and she said, I'm going to introduce you to somebody, and you're going to ask that person for 3 more contacts, and you're going to meet all of those people for coffee. And that she taught me how to network by doing that. And I worked my way around coffee shops and Starbucks in New York City in 2008, and finally landed my first job on the trading floor at Merrill Lynch, simply because a woman managing director, her associate, had just resigned. And because of that network, they slotted me right in, because I was right there with the right network. I never would have gotten to that position by applying and sending in a resume. But that is the attitude that I have now taken even within my own company, right? You can bet your bottom dollar that I'm going to ask these 2 ladies at some point in the near future to get together and to get coffee, right? I'm going to ask people in my office to get together and get coffee. That whole idea of just being proactive is something that most people don't do. It's so easy, and it really can pivot you towards success.
No, I 100% agree. I think for me, and I think for a lot of us in the audience, the key takeaway is prioritize that networking,
Yep.
make time for that coffee chat, invest in those relationships, because that sometimes is what's going to help you with that pivot. It's not always just putting the application in for your resume. So now I want to transition to Arianne. You have worked at some amazing companies like Goldman Sachs, as well as Merrill Lynch, before joining a company that's as amazing as Webull. But there is a bit of a transition from from such a large company to a smaller scale company, whether it be the number of employees, the different working style. How did you transition? How did you navigate that to also be successful in a company that has a different culture, a different environment, a different working style?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm still trying to figure it all out and working through that. But I love learning every day because of it. I'd say every pivot in my career was a learning experience. Every pivot in my career expanded my knowledge, my network, and it also pushed me to go beyond what I thought I was capable of doing. It's almost that non-woman thing where you feel like you have to be good at everything. You have to take that step where you not sure you're really going to be good at everything, and guess what that means? You're going to fail. And boy, I failed a lot, and I'm happy to say I failed a lot, but it was some of the most wonderful learning experiences by putting myself out there beyond my comfort zone, accepting a role maybe that I didn't think I was going to be able to be good at, and I pushed myself to continue to get better and better while failing and getting better and better and better. And when I think of that, I think of it doesn't matter about the size of the company. It could be the biggest or the littlest. The approach that I took is equally similar. And I look at a couple different ways of thinking about that in different points in my career when I've pivoted, two in particular. My first 8 or 9 years I was at Merrill Lynch in multiple different capacities. My first capacity was in M&A and syndicate. So I was doing origination, debt syndicate, working 100 to 120 hours a week, and knew I kind of had a transition because I was an athlete in college and just needed to get to a trading floor. Fortunately, with some great mentors and some people looking out for me within Merrill Lynch, they said, hey, listen, I think you should go and check out the equity derivatives trading desk. They're looking for good athletes like yourself, using athletes, generally speaking. And I said, I have no idea what a derivative is. I have absolutely no clue. And I had some great mentors and some great teachers, and I was stuck between two senior people on the desk. That just threw me right in the middle of it. And I do recall failing my series exams multiple times in derivatives and finally getting it right, to be put on the phone in the middle of the major financial crisis, and sales trading as best as I possibly can. I vividly remember my boss, Tim Freeman at the time, taking a call from those who've been in the business for a long time, the head of trading at Balyasny, his name was Raul, being like, Timmy, get her off the phone. She's terrible. She's so slow. She can't take any of my orders anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I got this. But there's something that either a female or an athlete in me said, that if I heard that I couldn't do something or I was a failure at it, that just drove me even harder. It was definitely that experience, because I've been in derivatives, or mainly in derivatives, ever since, which has probably been about 20 years. And secondly, another bigger pivot in my career, as I think about it, is I was still a we were going through the financial crisis. Merrill Lynch was acquired, and this is probably 2009, 2010 in my career. And everyone head down, no idea what was going to happen next. There's so much volatility in the marketplace, and quite frankly, you were just kind of making sure that you were actually going to be alive the next day, let alone what was going to transpire at work. And I got a phone call from a headhunter, and said, Arianne, we've been approached by Goldman Sachs. We're representing them. We wanted you to come over and run the electronic options algorithmic business. And you're going to meet with this partner tomorrow. And I said, okay, sure, but quite frankly, I have no idea what an algorithm is. So here I am, derivatives and algorithm, I have no idea. And this was 2010. And lo and behold, market structure was changing, financial markets were changing, institutional businesses was going more and more electronic, that it was at a really unique time of my career as well as the market's career, especially derivatives. Equities had already gone through it. And I ended up taking the job, and what I found as I transitioned out of, colloquially, Mother Merrill into, I say this humbly, gratefully, and most passionately and thankfully, the evil empire of Goldman Sachs was materially different types of cultures and learning how to navigate Wall Street as best as possible. And the task was to get or work as closely as possible with sales traders who knew their world, sales trading, taking people out, doing as many trades as possible, making as much commission dollars as possible, to tell them that not only are you going to make 50 cents instead of $3 a trade, that we're going to do this together. And that was a pretty tall task at the time, because really what we were doing was, in theory, marginalizing their role, marginalizing the business, but actually thinking forward about how electronic everything was about to become. I'd say, in short though, those experiences were really positive to say, hey, listen, I do embrace a culture. I'm embracing a culture here at Webull. It's tremendous. And that is one of the more important things about navigating any pivot, whether it's forced or whether it's chosen for you to do in your career. Embracing the teamwork, embracing the qualities of others, but also being flexible and being thoughtful of maybe you're not right and that answer is right. Being able to do it together was really important with every one of those pivots, whether I was failing or whether I was being successful with my teammates. And every company is different, so it's important to recognize that and go in it with an open mind.
First of all, thank you for being so vulnerable and open about your experiences. I think sometimes we forget that failure is a part of our career journey, and it is so important. One failure is not going to impact your entire career. It might get you down for a little bit, but you can definitely bounce back, and I definitely see that with your story. For women who might be struggling with failure, maybe they have a manager that doesn't believe in them or doubts them, like it was in your instance, and I think in some instances that can really get to someone, really impact their mental. How did you bounce back? How did you still believe in yourself? How did you push forward and not think that one person's negative opinion or negative feedback was you, essentially?
Yeah, a tough skin, thick skin, I should say. But I was blessed with a lot of wonderful mentors. I think at Merrill, but also at Goldman Sachs, there's and even here, there's a strong mentorship program, whether I was a mentee at that point and I had some great mentors. My bosses were wonderful in terms of, hey, listen, chin up, let's go, put your back in, and I'm going to throw you back in, and you're going to get back on the phones, or you're going to be able to go do this trade, or, hey, listen, we didn't get that one, but let's get the next one. Those are some things that I think were extremely important for me. And also important for me as I was navigating maybe a new opportunity, because it was that mentor that was said, hey, maybe it's time for you to shift, or guess what, there's this great opportunity for you. So not only helping you with the negative or the challenging times in your career, it's also those that are also helping you to advance your career. And one other point I'll make on that is I'm a huge advocate of being a mentor and mentoring other individuals in the industry, or even just beyond the industry. And I do that because at one point when I said, hey, how can I pay you back for what you're doing for me, or how you helped me get this job? And that person just said to me, pay it forward. And I'm a big advocate of saying paying it forward. So I like to give as much as I possibly can based off of how much I got over the course of my career.
Thank you for sharing, Arianne. Now I want to transition to you, Melissa. You started your career in finance. You've been a business owner. You've co-founded a charity. You've done a lot in your career. How have you navigated the mindset shifts as you've entered and embraced these different roles?
I guess I'll start by saying you always hear the word like imposter syndrome thrown around a lot, and I love it. I'm like, bring it on. Like, I love going in a situation, quite honestly, and that kind of feeling of like it's slightly uncomfortable, and I don't really know what I'm doing, and I don't know, I kind of thrive off that, because if you're not, then you're obviously not learning, you're not challenging yourself. So I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. I don't know. So I guess in terms of the mindset, I don't feel like the mindset is totally different. I mean, I kind of worked in different industries, but in terms of like anytime you have a new product, whether it's in finance or even like with apparel, it's like, you have to think about all the things that lead up to getting that product sold so you can make the sale, right? So, whether it's production, you're working, on like a strategy, your commercials, the dev work, everything that you can do to get the product out, knowing your target audience. I think it's very similar, right? So obviously with finance and even my apparel company, I had a women's cycling and triathlon apparel company. And so to me, it's like, hey, you got to get the clothes out, and what, look at our clothes. What is it made up of? You got zippers, you got, thread, you got fabric. So all those things in my head is very easy to like, kind of compartmentalize and think, okay, this is what I have to get at. This is what the goal, and anything that leads to that goal is what I have to do. So I kind of like the, logistics of putting together somewhat of a new idea or product. And it's messy, obviously there's a lot of moving pieces, but I really enjoy, I guess, like grabbing those pieces and then pushing that forward. I guess the second part of your question was what I learned, or?
Yes, the second part was what you learned in each role.
I definitely learned to take a hard look at my strengths and more so my weaknesses, and surrounding myself with people that were not necessarily smarter, but just had skills that I didn't have, right, and different strengths that they had. You know, I'm not a good developer. I'm not on the tech side. So, you know, what do you have to do to work with those people, whether it's, you know, developing a website, developing like SEO, ads, strategy, all of that, like hiring those people or bringing them into you to help you. You know, there's a lot of people that I rely on for my small business. So, I mean, really, that's what I learned, is to really kind of like pull in those people. And even now that I'm back in finance, I also learned that it's a lot easier, I think, to work for someone else than it is for yourself. And I'm glad I did it, like, no regrets, but you know, I feel like I miss the collaboration. Like, you definitely have more accountability when it's your brand, it's your product, which is why I chose to do that. But at the same time, you know, I kind of miss more of the collaboration, where I get to do now back in finance on the digital asset side, and I really do enjoy that. So yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing and breaking that down for us. Next, I want to kind of just transition us and really get us thinking about our experiences as women, especially women who are often navigating male-dominated spaces, especially when it comes to the finance industry. And one of the things that often comes up, probably in those conversations in the bathroom or those conversations with our mentors, how do we get the respect that we deserve? How do we navigate those situations where it feels like we're the only one and we're trying to make sure that we're feeling heard, we're advocating for ourselves? So Arianne, I'm sure you've navigated some of those things internally. You may have had conversations with other women in the industry about this, and you've definitely had a couple of years to experience it, and I know the field has evolved. So maybe talk a little bit about your early experience, what it looked like advocating 10, 20 years ago, and then what it looks like now, because I know the industry has changed a bit.
Yeah, I like this question. We get asked it a lot, but it's a good one to kind of talk through. Hey, listen, I joined Wall Street. I knew what I was getting into, and that was, and I knew it was going to be mostly male dominated, and that didn't scare me. And you had to embrace that. And so that came with the good and the bad. I think what I realized as I look back a little bit now, and I originally thought I had to get in, you know, I had to be one of them. I had to talk like one of them. I had to be one of them. I had to do the good and the bad like one of them, and even you know, respond like that. And there was a point when I probably got through maybe my 20s where I was just, it dawned on me that, and I got married, and I was probably about to have my second child, and I said, I have a daughter and a son. I'm thinking to myself, you know, I want them to see me as who I am, and quite frankly, I'm doing the company a disservice, because I'm really not speaking from what my true opinion might be. Now, it took me probably a good 10 plus years, 15 years to really put myself in a position that, you know, maybe that wasn't the opinion that that everyone wanted to hear. Maybe I was coming it from a different perspective, but I think studies have shown, and even we are showing now with this great group of individuals here, that diverse opinions make an organization materially better. But I was afraid to. I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to be confident of my own voice. And as I started doing that and working on that, I felt myself getting more credibility. But I was afraid to do it because I thought I had to be one of them originally. And I think, though, that the industry's done a wonderful job, like these types of events, where we're encouraging that to happen more. And that's support not only from females, but males. And that has been really important for me. I'd say, secondly, I've been in the derivatives business, and there's been conferences and events that I could probably count on 1 to 2 hands of how many female were in the room. And we stood out like a sore thumb. So you had to like really lean in and be thoughtful about what you were presenting, or how your perspectives were going to be heard. And quite frankly, you had to get it right. Maybe there was a different standard, but that's neither here nor there. But a quick story would be, you know, while I was at Goldman, I had the opportunity to sit on many industry committees. It's one of my friends, Jess, in the back row, and as well as SIBO's advisory board. And it was my first year. They had an off-site once of their 4 meetings a year. And it was in Florida. And it was my first one, so I'm like, all right, I've got to study, I've got to make sure I'm prepared to ask notes, I've got questions to ask, I'm going, and I'm going to go to this first session super early and get ready. And I get down to the conference room, I walk in, and the room's packed and everyone's already eating breakfast. And I was like, oh boy. So the CEO stands up, I kid you not, and he goes, Arianne, well, it's nice of you to join us. Now that you're extremely late, why don't you start the meeting off with introductions as well as some key thoughts? And I'm thinking to myself, oh shit. I'm like blushed, I'm sweating at this point. I was like, I'm not gonna let this guy intimidate me. You know what, I gotta sit up and I'm gonna ask questions. So I kind of shut that one off, and I stood in the middle of that room, I presented myself, and then I continued to ask questions throughout the day. But it's those types of events where you really have to put yourself out there. But you know, I think those are ones that really were pivotal to me in my career, making sure that I was standing up and putting my best face forward. I would say a couple years later, I was approached actually from Melissa's husband to join SIBO. So hopefully in that experience, I put my best foot forward, and thankfully they hired me. So.
No, I love that. And I think that anecdote will really help a lot of our junior professionals in the audience, because sometimes when you make those mistakes, or maybe you're 2 minutes late, it feels like the end of the world. But that just goes to show you that sometimes when you make mistakes, it's how you respond. Brandis, I would love to talk to you next. A similar question, given that you've also been in male-dominated industries. How have you navigated this? What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, I think it's really important when you think about your whole self to think about what you're good at and what type of environment that you thrive in. And I think it's really important as you progress down your career to really get a very, very good sense of self. And if the last time I spoke it was about knowing your network and utilizing your network, I would say that this advice that I would give is the opposite of that. It's about knowing yourself, right? And if you, to Arianne's, to her point, if you know that I was a college athlete, I played lacrosse at the Naval Academy, right? I was in the Navy, right? So I think it was a foregone conclusion that Wall Street would be a really good environment for clearly the type of person that I am and I was, right? And when I was trying to figure out, when I was leaving the military, where do I go? Literally, what career, do I want to go into marketing? Do I want to go into publishing? I mean, it was like I had no idea, right? I didn't have a career fair at my college. We went into the service and served in the military. You know, I talked to a lot of people and I was like, oh, that seems like a little, so there's a lot of feelings going on over there, right? I don't know if I'm good with that. Like, I don't know if that's my thing. But a lot of people really have a lot of feelings and a lot of feelings. And maybe I'm better over here where there's not very many feelings over here. The sales and trading floor at Merrill Lynch, there's not a lot of feelings on it. There's a lot of, yeah. So I think but you need to know that. If you're the type of person, you know, take a Myers-Briggs survey. If you're the type of person that in the morning, if someone approaches you and doesn't say, good morning, how was your night? Do you mind helping me with this thing, right? That know that about yourself. Or if you're the type of person that just likes to dive right in, can you help me with this thing? Sorry, good morning. Right? Are you a good morning person or not? Do you need that to feel validated? Does the person next to you need that type of response? Right? Knowing your emotional EQ is a really pivotal part of knowing where you should be driving yourself in your career, where you're going to thrive and excel, and where it may not be the right environment for you. And I think if that kind of cutthroat, male-dominated, not that many women type of environment is somewhere where you find this ability to really flex on your imposter syndrome and dive in, and that makes you feel motivated, then go all in on that. But if that makes you feel uncomfortable, then maybe take a job where there's a little bit more emotional EQ. And I don't think either of them is the right or wrong approach. Male-dominated or female-dominated, know yourself and set yourself up in a position where you are best suited to succeed. And if you're not feeling comfortable in an environment based on gender or race or culture or whatever, change your situation. Change it for yourself. Change it sooner than later. Put yourself in the position where you can be the most successful, because you are ultimately in charge of your career, right? And then also on top of that, like, know when you're best positioned to succeed. Like, think about how you operate on a day-to-day basis. I know for a fact that I think the best in the morning. I schedule all of my really important calls and my really important thoughtful activities in the morning because I know that's when I'm my best, right? If that's how you operate, schedule your day to best position yourself to be successful, right? Back end your day with things that maybe don't require as much energy and brain power if you know you're not good there. So, I mean, just really, I think the whole idea is it's not about male versus female environments. It's about knowing yourself. Know yourself in the culture, know yourself in the course of your day, know yourself in the course of the environment you like to work in an open floor versus a closed office. Make yourself in the best position to be as successful as you possibly could be. That would be my advice.
I absolutely love all of that. I think it's so important to know yourself, and that way you can figure out whether an organization is a culture fit or not. I think sometimes you're like, I want the money, I want the title, I want this, but you don't often take a step back and think, where am I really set up to be successful?
Yeah.
Next, I want to talk a little bit about navigating that transition when you're figuring out whether you want to go to a new job, a new company, maybe you're even transitioning industries. I think sometimes when you're exploring those thoughts, you might get feedback. Maybe it's from mentors, maybe it's from friends, like, you sure you want to do that? Are people going to take you seriously? Do you think you'll ever be able to go back into this field? I know I personally faced that when I was transitioning from consulting to marketing. But Melissa, I know you may or may have not experienced those questions. So walk me through that process when you decided, okay, finance has been great, but I do want to explore entrepreneurship. I do want to explore being a founder. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I'll preface by saying, I come from, my parents are both immigrants, right? So they didn't have the luxury of like, do I fit in the culture, or how do I feel about this and my feelings? It was like, nope, take many jobs you can to make the money to get the food on the table. So I feel very, very privileged to be able to kind of make these decisions and walk away from like a seemingly traditional, like a stable kind of job to try something completely new. So it was one of those things where I felt a little bit burnt out being in the finance business, to be totally honest. And I'd always wanted to do something a little bit more creative, and I always loved working with my hands, and I always wanted to go to Parsons. So I said, you know what, I'm going to sign up, I'm going to go to Parsons, I'm going to learn how to do all these new different skills and, be with different people from all over the world and learn this. I knew I didn't want to be in like fashion design per se. I knew I wanted to do something that was in a business that was creative. And at the time I used to compete in triathlon. I did Ironman, and it was one of those things where you show up and like you see like a handful of women, right, doing these races out there, and I hated the clothes, honestly. It was one of the selfish reasons. I'm like, I know it's Lycra, spandex, but it doesn't make me look good. I'm out there for like 10 plus hours, swimming, biking, running, and every little thing that can help keep me going, whether it's food or cheering or feeling good about myself because of the clothes, that was, what I wanted. So I figured, that's the perfect blending of, the things I like to do in my free time, being creative, coming up with a business, getting product out there. So that for me was what, made me, it was really just racing and realizing, hey, I don't see anything that I want to wear and I don't feel good in it. So, I enjoyed it. And I got to say, like, one of the biggest highs I ever had was like when I was racing and I'd see women like pull up alongside me or past me wearing my clothes, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I love it, I did that. Or like, if I'm riding in Central Park and someone stops and says, hey, where'd you get that outfit? And it's like, it's amazing. So that to me was just like truly, it made everything worth it, and made me love that decision of just trying something new.
No, that was really, really helpful, especially knowing what motivated you. I think a lot of women might be able to resonate with that, being in finance for some time and having that inkling of wanting to explore entrepreneurship. So really appreciate you sharing. With the theme of transitions, I'm going to you, Brandis. I think sometimes we think that we have to move companies to make a transition, but sometimes there's opportunities for internal mobility and to take on a completely different role. I know you've been at Nasdaq for some time, so can you explain the different jobs you've had throughout the years there and how your role has evolved, the new skills you've gained, and how you navigated making those strategic changes?
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Nasdaq for almost 15 years, which is crazy because people don't stay at companies for this long anymore. When I started at Nasdaq, we had a couple hundred people. We were based down here on Fulton Street, and we were a couple $1 billion in market cap at the best. We now have 10,000 people, right? And we're almost a $50 billion market cap company. So the company itself, while I want to take credit and say, you know, I stayed for all of these reasons, it's because the company has grown so dynamically that every year has felt like a completely new change, and so it's felt like a new challenge. I will say that I started at Nasdaq and I was engaged. I had my first child here in the city. We bought an apartment. We moved to the suburbs, bought a house, had a second kid, right? I mean, so, and by 8 years in, I was ready at Nasdaq to make another change within the company. So I do think that the company has, you know, and ideally you'll find this at different points in your careers as well, or you have found this. There's moments when I feel like you push the accelerator to the limit and you're ready to go, and there's moments where you feel like you maybe need to go on neutral for a tiny little bit. And I think that's an okay thing. And so there's moments at Nasdaq where I sat in a job and I was doing well, but it wasn't challenging because I had a lot of other things going on in my personal life where I was trying to raise kids and I was trying to just get through the day. And then there's moments where you're able to say like, okay, now I'm ready to go. All right, and each time I kind of made a career jump at the company, it was when I was at a point where I was ready to start to put the pedal to the metal again, or I was done learning something and I was ready to try something new. And every time I've made a change at Nasdaq, I've also looked on the outside as well, right? Because it's really good to cast a wide net and to make sure that you're always looking at other opportunities, right? And I've made conscious decisions to stay at Nasdaq as opposed to changing into a different company. My most recent move was a really big one, right? So now I'm an SVP at Nasdaq, and that requires a pretty big executive level, basically a board level approval at the company. And that's when I finally realized how important your reputation is for the entire time that you are anywhere. Because when it comes to making a decision, like, are we gonna give her the yes? Is she the right person for this big role? Are we gonna bet big on this person? It was incredible to me how every person that I interacted with at the company actually mattered. And some of the biggest influencers on giving the yes were the executive assistants, going back and saying, she was always nice to us. She always said thank you. She was never rude. She never stomped over here and told me to do something, right? That conversation I had in line at our sales kickoff 2 years ago with Brad Peterson, who's our CTO. And he remembered that conversation, and at the table that I wasn't present for, he was able to say, she's good people. She treats people, right? All running into somebody in the hallway, running into someone in the bathroom. You don't realize that the aggregate of all of these relationships end up mattering when there's a table and they're making a decision and you're not able to actually advocate for yourself. So, I mean, looking back, had I known like that all these people would have such an impact, I probably would have tried to be even nicer. But I just don't think that you realize how much you're actually impacting everybody every single day with everything that you do, and how it all could come to really matter in a decision that's made for your career later on down the line. So my guidance would just be really kind. Be your best self. Work is so stressful. It's so hard to get snappy. I know we're all tired. We're all overworked. We're working 120 hours. Just be kind to your colleagues, be kind to yourselves, because you never know when that person who you don't think is relevant, who you don't think matters, actually may have a say in your next step in your career.
I really love that you shared that, especially the tidbit around being really respectful and nice to the executive assistants. I don't think that gets talked about enough. I remember when I was growing up, my mom always used to say, treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO. And I definitely think your experience speaks to that, because sometimes there are those moments where that senior leader might go, hey, like,
yes.
What is she actually like behind the scenes?
What do you think of that? Yeah. Yep.
So I really, really appreciate you bringing that example.
Yeah.
So now I have one final question. I know you all must have extremely busy lives, from your family to being senior executives, or even in positions in life where you started your own business. And I personally know there's a term called work-life balance. I don't know if I believe in that. I kind of believe in work-life harmony. How do you blend it? So we'll use work-life harmony, work-life balance, whatever your preference is. But I don't just want the basic answers. Like, I really want actionable tips. Like, when you're going to the next level, who's that team that you're bringing on to really support your household, support you at work? What does that look like on the day-to-day? Are there services that you use to make your life a little bit easier? Things that you do for self-care to stay well physically, mentally? I really want you to get into the nitty-gritty, what you write in your journal, what's on your calendar. This is not the time to gatekeep.
Want me to take it?
Go for it.
Yes, Erin.
I know Carrie's heard me say this before, but I'm still trying to figure that out. I've not figured it out, so I'm going to listen to everyone else here for a quick minute too. But one of my secrets is I snap my kids rather than text my kids because they respond a lot faster. So if that's a tip you want to hear, I'm happy to share it.
I love it.
No, jokes aside, I think I'm still a student of this. If I look at myself in my 20s, I find myself to be that I was driving very hard. I was very into my career. I was very into getting that next promotion. I was trying to get up the ladder. I was putting as much effort as I possibly could in. I would even call myself very selfish, and I knew that my balance was out of whack, and that wasn't going to be the secret to success. I don't think I knew that at that point. I just kept doing it, but maybe I was going to get sick. But within, like I said, in my early 30s, I got married and started to have children. I was forced to balance, and that balance was whether or not I wanted it. I had to make choices, and I learned how to make choices. There were times in my career where, hey, listen, my babysitter couldn't make it. My husband and I both grew up on Wall Street. Our kids learned to know that their parents were either traveling, that a work dinner, working on a trading floor, and not always around during the day. And there was a lot of times if I didn't have a babysitter coming, guess what? I was not going into the office, and that was some of the things I had to learn myself about how and when I was present at work, and how I also was very present at home. And I couldn't feel guilty about it. There was definitely some times in my 30s that I felt guilty for not being 100% in at work, or even 100% at home, and missing things at school. That was hard. But you had to realize that you can't be good at everything. And creating that balance was really, really important. Probably now maybe I'm old, and you guys are also young, and I'm starting to figure out that that's becoming much, much easier in my older age. Being able to throw a lot of resources at things and not being afraid to say, I need help, a lot of help. And there's times where I said, hey, listen, I'm going to be a better employee because I'm going to take my son to a lacrosse tournament this weekend, and I'm going to leave halfway through my day on Friday. But I know when I'm on the road next week that my kids are going to be okay, and they're going to kick ass. And I'm going to be super focused on work and giving my best to all of my colleagues. And it's that balance that makes me a better employee. But I didn't know that for a long time. And being able to be that person now, maybe hopefully I'll be able to live a little bit longer, because the path I was on before, I was definitely getting a heart attack at 60.
So what I'm hearing you say, there is some level of sacrifice.
There's definitely a level of sacrifice, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't think I'm there yet. So.
Well, of course. I really do appreciate the vulnerability. I do think it's going to help so many women in the audience who may already have a family or are thinking about starting a family. So I really appreciate you being so open about your experiences. Melissa, I'd like to talk to you next a little bit more about your experience in the first year and second year of entrepreneurship, especially given that you were in corporate before.
Yeah, if we're talking about, I guess, setting boundaries and finding the work-life balance, I think there's this huge pressure to always like lean in, raise your hand, and I feel like as I get older, I'm fine with leaning out, like you said, going in neutral. In fact, I love saying no, like, you know, and my family have this joke, like everybody knows if mom is happy, then everybody's happy, okay? And so I like taking that approach, is like I will lean in if I am, you know, interested, if I'm learning, if I'm engaged, and then I'll lean out if, you know, it's a time suck, because if it's not adding any value, then it's sucking it out of my life. So you know, fortunate enough to have a wonderful partner that can, you know, help me and, you know, work together to make it all happen and balance the two. But at the same time, like putting trust, you know, with outsourcing, whether it's babysitting or doing some of the things that take up my time that don't add value. You know, I feel fortunate enough to be able to do that. And then even at work now, you know, spreading the love and giving, you know, relying more on other people. Like I know that I tend to be a perfectionist in a lot of ways, but I've learned, again, you have to spread out those responsibilities and work as a team, because you just can't have everything. You have to pick and choose, especially in finance. I've been in sales for most of my career. So yeah, you're not going to be able to, like, you know, go out to drinks like last minute, because I have a schedule to keep, right? I can't go play golf for 4 hours. I can't, you know, I have to drop off my kids at 8:30. I can't do that meeting that you just put on my calendar like half an hour ago. So there are things like that where I think with age it comes where it's not like I don't care as much, but I kind of don't. Like I feel like I am pretty happy with my career and my life, and I have no problem saying that's just not going to work for me. So that's kind of how I balance it.
No, I appreciate you being so open about that. I'd also like to explore your time in entrepreneurship as well, and your thoughts on hustle culture, it really being glorified. I feel like there was a period where we also had the girl boss era as well, with the rise of female entrepreneurships. Not that there weren't females who were entrepreneurs, it was just that we were now getting the press, the accolades, all of that. But with that definitely came the pressures of hustle culture. And I think now we're moving into an era where we're talking a little bit more about boundaries, setting time boundaries. Were you ever in the hustle culture era, or that never really impacted you? And if yes, maybe share a little bit more about how you learned to set those healthy boundaries.
Sure. Well, I feel like everybody up here hustles, right? Like we have to, right? To just do everything we want to do and get it done every day. I like that. You know, you talk about the girl boss and all that, and I like, you know, the visibility it has given to women, but I have to be honest, I feel like it's a fine line. It can be patronizing as well. You know, you have these events like, you know, International Women's Day and all these things, and I think it's great for visibility, but it's a very fine line, and I feel like I've been on the other side where I feel like, yeah, it is patronizing. Like I want to just do a good job regardless of my sex, right? Female, male, it doesn't matter. I just want to be known as just being a person that does a good job. So I don't know, I feel like I struggle with that a little bit, you know, where I like the visibility, but at the same time I don't want to be treated any differently because I'm a female, right? Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but.
No, that was great. Well, I think we definitely covered a lot of amazing topics that are so applicable to women at different stages of their career. But before we end, I really want to make sure we have enough time to answer the audience's questions. So I think now would probably be a great time to open up for Q&A. So not everyone all at once, but if we have any questions, we'll be going around. So I'll open that up now if anyone has questions.
Hi, Christina. So being on the same age group as you ladies up here, how do you find, and I often find it a little bit, I don't want to say challenging, but challenging, trying to figure out how to mentor the young women coming through the workforce, even the young guys coming in, they'll come to me for advice, and the generational differences between the hand-holding versus, I know we've heard some of us say it before, it's like, no, you just get in there and you do it, and it was an attitude or how your personality is, right? Like the thick skin, and just you could take things. And how do you, being a mentor myself to people, how do you handle sometimes kind of looking at them and being like, is this really a question versus this is a generational difference, and yes, times have changed. Like how do you approach that or find it challenging or not? I think it's important for everybody to understand here.
Let me
take it?
Yeah, you can take that, because I don't have the answer to that. I agree with that problem. I agree with that problem.
Yeah, no, it's definitely different. And they probably look at us like we're different too.
Yeah.
So like it kind of works both ways. You can see me, I tend to be vulnerable and I tend to just tell it like it is. And I think if I'm able to eloquently in some way, shape or form, just be honest with them, whether that's the way that they might approach things or tactically think about, hey, maybe why don't you think about it this way? Or how did this go for you if this was something that maybe you should approach it a little bit of a different way. I tend to throw the question back at them to ask them to respond first, and then I can kind of maybe ease into, maybe we don't do it that way next time. But you know, those are just some ways. I'm a huge advocate of mentoring, as I mentioned, and seemingly you are as well. I also like this culture, or just anyone to be like, hey, listen, if I'm going to put the work in if you put the work in. So like having them constantly, you know, maybe put time on my calendar or continue to be disciplined about that. That's when I know that they're going to want to learn and take things out of it. And equally, I'm going to get something out of it as well. So it's not easy. It's like with kids, you know, they're all different. You just got to kind of go with what the personality is.
I think sometimes it's helpful. This is a little much, but with my team, sometimes I say, you know, I'm not passive aggressive. I'm just aggressive. And ideally, I don't like the word aggressive because it's like such a woman term. But like just level setting. Like I'm not going to beat around the bush. And if I do notice something, and I'm going to give you constructive feedback because I would appreciate constructive feedback, right? There's nothing worse, and this has happened in my career, where I've been in a meeting with generally a bunch of guys, and I say something or I do something in a meeting, and we all take an Uber together, and we all go to the airport together, and we get on an airplane, and then I find out like 2 days later from somebody else to somebody else that someone didn't like something that I said in that meeting, right? Or something, right? Why didn't you just tell me the entire car ride to the airport on the airplane? And like, just tell me, like, right? Like, why did you have to just? I can take it. Give me the feedback. Right? And so I think that you have to be careful. Every child, one of my children would not appreciate that type of approach, right? So I understand not everyone can handle that type of feedback, but sometimes if you just say it straight, like I'm never going to be a passive aggressive mentor to you. I'm going to give you advice, and you can give that same type of like very honest feedback back to me about how you feel I'm doing, and I owe that much to you as your mentor, for me to be honest. There was a woman recently that came to me for mentorship. She had applied for a job in a different role and applied for the job, went through the process, went on a whole panel of interviews, blah, 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 blah. She gets the offer letter, she gets the job. And then she says, I actually don't think I'm going to take the job. And I said, but you went through the entire process. They spent all this time interviewing you. It's an internal, like they gave you the offer. Like you really, at that point, you can't really take it back, right? Like, oh, thanks, I'm so glad I won out of all these other candidates and spent everyone's time, but I'm good. Like, no, like, and I was like, you know, okay, I'm good, I'm just gonna stay right here. I'm sorry for wasting everyone's time. But I was like, so next time, you know, you need to really make sure that if you're gonna call it and decide you don't wanna go for it, you call it a little bit earlier, because they're never gonna offer you a job over there again. Right, you've burned that bridge. That bridge is not going to be available for you anymore. And you better call up that person and apologize and say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize this got out of hand, right? It got away from me, and I didn't mean to have it go so far. And then, but I was like, she's like, oh, I'd never realized. I didn't know, right?
So I just have a question about managing up, and I know this is always a delicate topic, or maybe it's one that either people have gone really well doing, or, you know, I'm constantly dealing obviously with different personalities. I typically report to a CEO in my position, and as you know, they're very colorful. So I guess my question is more about, you know, when you have obviously a difference in opinion and you're just trying to make your case in different ways, and I think, you know, when you're dealing with somebody in that role who has been there for maybe many years, right? In my case, it's, you know, 10 plus, been, you know,
repeat entrepreneur, you know, kind of set in his ways, is very smart, knows what he's doing. And when I'm trying to bring in a new approach to whether it's how to, you know, evoke sales or take a different approach internally, because a lot of the management team is also set in their ways. You have people at this organization that's been in their roles for 10 to 15 years, you know, they just don't know any differently. And you kind of have one person that, I don't want to be like a raging bull, right? You know, excuse the pun, but it's like, you know, how do you relate, I guess, in another way? I mean, yes, it could be a generational thing. It could be a personality difference. It could be a number of different things that are like making them just kind of fall short of taking you seriously, on top of the fact that they have no time for you, right? So I have one day out of the week, right, that like I have their attention in a group setting. So I guess, you know, just wanting to get a flavor of your experiences when you've successfully been able to manage up or change the mindset of somebody that you're reporting to that is quite set in their ways and has been successful in doing that for so long, right? So how do you think about that?
I guess I'll start. I think for me, being very clear and concise, that goes a long way, and then throwing in sense of humor. I mean, because at the end of the day, we're not saving lives, we're not like solving the world's problems, right? So it's like, get a grip, right? It's not, but I find that like, you know, when managing up, you want to have those thoughts prepared before. Maybe if you're a visual, put it on paper. Because, you know, as soon as their eyes start to glaze over, and I've seen that with, you know, it's just like you don't have their attention. So if you're clear and concise with what you want, and if you can put some humor in it, I think that always, you know, has worked.
I think, yeah, like to Melissa's point, I think the humor's great. I'm a big advocate of like pre-previewing with the room, whether that's like having side meetings around that might build consensus if it's in a group setting, or individuals in the executive suite that might be looking to, or you're looking to seek their approval as well as the CEO's approval. I think from a female standpoint, I try very hard to get the emotion out of it, right? Because there's times where you're like, I know this is the right answer, and if you go in like that, you're definitely not going to get it. Yeah. So taking that emotion out of that conversation and allowing for the give and take. Hey, that's a great idea, but why don't you do it this way? Oh, all right. And then you know that maybe you're actually getting equally closer to what you want, but maybe not exactly with what you want. So I usually I do a lot of pre-previewing to knowing that if I go in that room, I'm gonna nail it because I've got other people with consensus too. Yeah. It's kind of a little bit my secret sauce.
I think sometimes, like I've had managers before where I knew that if I wanted to get something my way, I had to start to work on it early, right? So I knew if I wanted to get a yes on something by April 30th, I would start to marinate it like a couple weeks, right? Every single, this is an idea, get them like, okay, they're getting, okay, this is what are we thinking, what are we really thinking about, right? So you can kind of set yourself up, like knowing that you're not going to get what you want if you introduce it on day one and you're not going to get the answer that you want, like setting yourself up and kind of dripping it out over time. So when you do need that final answer, it's not the first surprise.
Bear in mind, it might be a bad day too, so you gotta pick and choose the day. You never know. You never know what you're gonna get.
Hi, I'm Sunny. I have a question for women in my age group. I just turned 32 yesterday. I'm married. Thank you. And honestly, I think about whether I want to have kids like every other day, and I don't know because I want to keep the trajectory I have in my career path, but I don't know how you all do it. I wonder if there's any like practical advice you can give leading up to your maybe maternity leave, and then also on your way back from maternity leave. Is there anything you did for yourself to set yourself up for success as you left and came back to stay at the top of your career trajectory?
I'm going to start because I'm not going to give a real answer. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said that I called my girlfriend who worked at Bloomberg and she told me to stop breastfeeding before I went back to work, right? Like I would give you, which is true, I would give you practical examples. But now, years later, I would tell you a saying that I tell my team all the time, and it's called, don't borrow worry. Has anyone heard of that? Don't borrow, worry. It means like don't worry about things that you don't even know about yet. Like if you want to have a kid, and you'll worry about your pregnancy when your pregnancy comes, and you'll worry about where the kid's going to sleep when the kid arrives, right? And you'll worry about going back to work when you have to go back to work. Like sitting here right now, you're borrowing all of this worry that is not helping the universe make you successful in any way. You're just creating a lot of bad energy in your body, and I think you need to just decide if you want to have a child. Don't borrow the worry today. Make that your first step and go from there. But you guys may have more practical advice.
What she said, I mean, right? I wasn't sure if I wanted to have kids either. I'm very pleasantly surprised. They're pretty cool, you know. But you can't. There's like a myth. You can't have it all, but you come pretty darn close, right? To finding that balance, whatever works for you, and it doesn't really matter what. You know, everybody's worries are going to be different, and yours are going to be unique to you. And again, can't worry about it. Yeah.
I tried to hide my first pregnancy on a trading floor until I had to throw up and went running off the trading floor about 12 weeks in, and it was kind of obvious at that point. But I was blessed to have kids very quickly after I was married, and it just kind of happened that way. And we were on a path to have multiple kids. I'd say I agree with my colleagues. And then on the way back in. And I think our head of HR just came back. I vividly remember the anxiousness that I had returning, and what I realized once I got back, everyone was so excited to have you there and be back and congratulate you and hear about a child. That anxiousness of like what's going to happen and the fear of the unknown really tried to take over. And then you got there and you're like, oh, this is great, and my kid didn't die at home, and you know all was okay. And so those are things that obviously I can understand why there's a lot of anxiety. I went through it as well, and a lot of us go through it, so we all have our battle stories. But you'll just know when it's the right time for you to have children. And then I also think that this industry has done a phenomenal job with maternity leave. When I had my first child, I was barely 12 weeks and then back, and that was painful. And now they're clearly doing 4, 5, 6 months or whatever, and the dad also, or your partner gets that as well. So those are some things that I think we've done an awesome job as an industry and worldwide, that's not just finance, to make it a lot better for you and making sure that you are set up to be successful at home and on the job as if you make that decision. So, yeah.
So I just have a question about like receiving feedback in the industry, because it's inevitable. We're going to receive feedback whether we ask for it, whether we don't, whether it's positive, negative. So how are we able to, when we receive feedback, kind of differentiate, okay, this is something I need to work on, or kind of to your point where someone underestimated you and it's like, no, like this is like not real, or kind of how do you differentiate between the two?
Differentiate between the two what?
Like feedback, like whether, I mean, I think you want to consider the source, right? And is there a reason that someone's giving you this feedback that seems like it may not be right? But I also think all feedback is good feedback. You said, you know, there's a saying in the military, like, roger that, right? Like, okay, roger that, thank you. Noted. I will take that into consideration, right? And then you think about it, you see if it applies, if you think it's valuable, and if not, you let it out of your brain and you don't think about it again, right? So I appreciate it, take it in, see if you think it's going to be helpful. Don't get defensive, doesn't do you any good, and move on.
Alrighty, thank you everyone.
Alrighty, so this was an amazing event. I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you for your words of wisdom. I think it's just beautiful that we've been able to come together today, those who have been on live stream, and just really be vulnerable and open. I think it's really easy to look at these amazing women and think, how am I going to get there? But I think you can get there, you can succeed, you can embrace the work-life harmony. But I would encourage you, as you leave here today, think about how you can continue to cultivate your network so you can get to that next level. Continue to think about how you can make time for events like these, because that's how you get to the next level. It's through community, it's through vulnerability and being open. So thank you again for coming, and thank you to our partners for sponsoring us.